beginning, man's needs were basic ones, such as food and a mate. When the sun rose, he could see the world outside his cave, and he felt secure. But when darkness fell, how was he to explain the evidence of unseen things that bumped and roared and thrashed about in the night? Fearing to investigate, he conjured up images of weird monsters, and his imagination knew no bounds. Later on, man refined his images of monsters, basing them on animals he knew, but put together in grotesque combinations. Unfortunately, however, by now he had come to believe that such creatures were real, and centuries passed before he gained the courage to actually investigate. Today, of course, these creatures at least remain as mere decorative symbols. Science and reason have brought modern man to the realization that while imagination is one of man's greatest attributes, it must be supported by investigation and fact. But still and all, just because evidence may at first appear to be purely imaginary, it cannot be totally disregarded. For example, in the late 1700s, letters from Australia reported sightings of a strange, improbable creature. It was described as having the body of a small, furry animal, but having a large duck's bill instead of a snout. It had webbed feet, a tail like a beaver's, and laid eggs, as birds do. Naturally, such unlikely stories were rejected by serious-minded men, until a duck-billed platypus was presented before their eyes. As late as 1860, stories coming from Africa told of a ferocious creature that prowled the jungles of the high country. This one was described as a hulking, man-like beast, covered with hair, except for its horrible face. Of course, upon investigation, this monster turned out to be the gorilla. In appearance, much like the mysterious reports, but by nature, a gentle vegetarian. Even today, other such examples are to be found, and Loch Ness, a large inland body of water in the Highlands of Scotland, is the locale of one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of modern times. Let us use our own imagination as we investigate more fully the story of Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. First, there is the evidence. Eyewitnesses who claim to have seen a most unusual creature.
It was from this point I had my first and best sighting in the month of May 1934. Standing here one lovely summer morning, sun shining brightly, loch flat calm, and right out from that green point I saw this huge animal, 30-foot body, head turning like so, and the neck 6 feet above water. There were two small trawlers coming through the canal, about to come into Loch Ness, and I'm positive the animal heard the beat of the engines. Well, the first trawler came out, and as soon as it came within the animal's view and mine, terrific dive, and there was a terrific upheaval in the water. That was my best sighting, out of 18.
Well, it was over 5 years ago, on the 2nd of August, in the afternoon, about 3:30. And my husband noticed our neighbours were excited, and also people along by the shore here. And he said, I think there must be something exciting in the loch. And he rushed out. And he said, come on, for goodness sake, there's the monster. And I said, what rubbish. I said, I'm not going. He said, well, if you don't come, you'll be very angry, because this is something I've never seen. So I grabbed the binoculars and went out, and there it was plodding up the loch. It was all wriggles. It wriggled like this. And my husband thought we saw between 20 and 30 feet.
Yes, I've actually seen it twice. The first time was opposite the castle. It was going at a terrific speed. There was about 4 humps, and it had scales, and it swam for about, I should say, 2 miles at a very fast speed, and then it disappeared completely, leaving quite a wash.
I was out fishing in the loch with a 15-foot rowing boat, and about 1.5 miles from the head of the loch, I saw this huge animal out about 35 yards from me. It would be roughly about 14 or 15 feet long, and 3 or 4 feet in width. The skin was very, very rough.
It put up such a big wash, came right up to our feet, that one of the small children ran up the bank because he was rather afraid it was coming out after him.
Well, it was out there we seen the monster. My son says, why not get the boat and go after it? So we did that. Went right across the loch. Well, it was a head the very same as looking at a horse from the side. A long head, and we saw the eye, and the 3 humps, everything but the tail.
Well, from what I've seen myself, and from what I've gathered from the people who've had very close sightings of these creatures, it's my feeling that they must be invertebrates. That is to say, they're not creatures with a skeleton at all. They're creatures of the class of slugs, of worms, that type of thing. Because so many witnesses have seen them changing shape.
Then one hump disappeared, then another one, then the other one.
Dark grey, crinkly looking, something like the elephant, you know, when he's walking.
It was dark in colour, and we saw between 20 and 30 feet.
Nothing at all is known about the identity of these creatures.
Head coming up and down as if it were fishing. Or salmon leaping out of its way.
We saw this huge thing in the water.
Before I got a fright, I felt the hair standing in the back of my head.
But we just saw the great black hump.
There were 7 humps. We seen the 3 humps.
One hump rose.
The whole body was a mass of wriggles.
Terrific splashing in the loch.
Terrific commotion.
Then it sank.
Queer beast.
Enormous size.
The centre part was thicker. A great black creature.
Shining.
Black blob.
Rolling up the loch.
A very objective thing.
I never saw the likes of it before, never since.
This is something completely new to science.
Yet there is much controversy as to whether he is really fact or fiction, monster or myth. So the mystery continues. But nowhere is Nessie more alive today than in the minds of the local school children. Here they're holding a Nessie drawing contest. As you can see, the various shapes, colors, sizes, and many forms the monster takes is only limited by the child's imagination. Since this is the story of all that is known and unknown about the monster, let's make a composite Nessie out of them. And perhaps we can get the story right from the monster's mouth. Nessie! Nessie! I say, old chap. Nessie, wake up, will you? We only want to hear your side of the monster story. Oh, come on, Nessie. Huh? Oh, well, never mind then. You're probably just a figment of the imagination anyway.
I'm not a figment. I'm a monster.
Oh, come now. Aren't monsters to be found only in fairy tales and such?
Oh, a lot you know. I come from a long line of monsters. Just look at some of my ancestors. Most of these prehistoric dinosaurs were amphibious, like me. They were so huge that on land they could hardly support their own weight, so they ended up in the lakes and lagoons, like me. By the way, dinosaur means terrible lizard. And by far the most terrible relative of all was my great-great-uncle, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Are they monster enough for you?
Yes, but I say you don't mind if we ask questions as we go along, do you?
Well, be my guest.
Well, haven't dinosaurs been extinct for millions of years?
So what? The coelacanth was supposed to be extinct too, until a few years ago when he popped up in a fisherman's net off Madagascar.
I'll have to admit you've got a point there.
And here's another one. Right now, I've got a bunch of gruesome-looking cousins down on the Galapagos. They're marine iguanas.
Yes, but they're pretty small.
Well, how about the dragon lizard of Komodo? They average 300 pounds and grow to over 10 feet. They're big enough to eat whole pigs.
Well, that's all very interesting, Nessie. But the real question is, how could monsters like you come to be in a loch like this?
Well, it just so happens that at one time, The loch was part of the sea, you see. Well, about 15,000 years ago, the loch and the sea around it was covered with ice. Then, about 3,000 years later, the ice melted and the sea level rose about 200 feet. And my ancestors could easily have come in at that time. Then, over the years, the land rose. And locked them in the loch.
Well, I suppose it could be possible.
And it's really not a bad home for a monster. Well, there's plenty of room to bask in quiet coves. It's a 50-mile, beautiful sightseeing swim around the loch. And practically everywhere you look, it's like a painting. And if you want peace and quiet, my favorite place is down at the end of the loch, right here in front of the abbey.
All right, Nessie, all right. Now let's get back to the point. If you and your ancestors had been here for such a long time, how did it happen that none of you were seen till about 40 years ago?
Not so at all. See, right over there on the walls of the abbey is a statue of St. Columba, who, back in the 6th century, saw my great-great-grandfather and recorded it. I quote from his biography. A man was swimming across the loch when he was attacked by a huge water monster. St. Columba commanded the fierce monster, saying, "Think not to touch thou that man. Quick, go back." The beast, on hearing this voice, was terrified and fled. And that's not all. Through the centuries, there were many other sightings duly recorded and documented.
All right, I believe you. But I still say the Loch Ness Monster didn't really make the headlines till, about 1930, wasn't it?
It was 1933, to be exact. The year they built the road around the loch. I remember I was down deep, relaxing in a hidden grotto. Stuck my head out to see what was going on. Then, well, no, you wouldn't believe it. I became a celebrity overnight. well, so, ever since, well, every now and then, I've been showing just enough of myself to keep the mystery going. In fact, I've got a record here of over 3,000 sightings of me. And they still haven't figured old Nessie out. Here's some photos that I posed for. This first one was taken in 1934. Well, that's not my best side. Here, in 1951, someone snapped my triple hump routine. In this one, oh, it was a good thing I kicked up a little spray, or I might have been unmasked. Here's a sighting I planned in 55 to give myself some scale. The castle's 50 feet, so I've got to be at least that. Of course, if you're not convinced by now that I'm for real, well, I guess you never will be.
Nessie, you haven't shown us any scientific proof.
Scientific proof? That's the very thing I'm trying to avoid, don't you see? Oh, no, there's old Hawkeye himself. He's been tailing me for years, and man, is he going about it in a scientific way. Tim Dinsdale, an engineer who's been scientifically investigating everything about me. He's come up with some very definite conclusions.
As a result of making a preliminary study of 100 separate eyewitness reports, I came up with this rather curious shape. The body, according to the evidence, is very long and sinuous. And we have on top these extraordinary humps, which are almost camel-like. And the odd thing about these humps is that they've been seen changing shape. It would appear that there are 3 humps. And I've tried to represent them like this in the basic structural position, if you like. It does seem that these humps are capable of altering shape and turning into rounded humps, and then perhaps inflating further and producing a curious back shape, which shows no humps at all, often described as an upturned boat. This very long body, the whole thing on average 40 to 50 feet long, which seems incredible, but nevertheless the evidence seems to suggest this. And on either side, 2 pairs of limbs. We don't really know what these look like. Various people describe them in different ways. One would assume that they're used in swimming. I would think, as an engineer, that the tail must be the primary method of propulsion. But there are a few people who claim to have seen it moving through the water, swishing from side to side with great force. But anyway, this is roughly what the thing looks like, I think. When I came to Loch Ness this year, I had one particular object in mind, and that was close-up surface photography. The construction here is a rig which is intended to produce photography under most circumstances. I've had some interesting experiences already, but I hope I will get the opportunity to use this equipment in the way it's designed to be used, and that we get some clear photography.
Well, believe it or not, when he first came up here in 1960, he got a movie of me. Beginner's luck.
Well, I hope you don't mind me saying so, but you do look pretty small there. Could be most anything.
I'll have you know that the Royal Air Force examined that picture very carefully. And what's showing of me is 16 feet long and 7 feet high. And those boys really know what they're doing.
If you say so.
Oh, no, there's another veteran monster hunter. He's a member of Parliament, David James. In 1962, he organized the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau. Listen to what I've got to put up with.
You're all new up here, or most of you are, so I'd best start at the beginning. As you know, citing reports from members of the general public and locals over the last 100 years, and RAF evaluation of film over the last 10 years, and more recently Birmingham University's sonar results all suggest that there's a large species of animal in this loch. Our object is to identify it by surface photography. The only chance of positive scientific identification is this surface photography of a creature which statistically seems to come to the surface about 30 times a year, and probably only 2 or 3 of those are good ones. So we are, I'm afraid, looking for a needle in a haystack, and you will probably have to work very long hours indeed. What we do, we've got our main camera rig there, which will be manned all the time, and we've got the 5 vans up in the yard you've seen, which we fan out to predetermined points up and down the loch to give us 90% coverage of the loch surface. Now, as I say, you may have to watch a very long time, but do remember that sooner or later, the right man is going to be in the right spot with the right camera at the right time when this elusive beast does make a surfacing.
How wrong can he be? But nevertheless, the Investigation Bureau keeps expanding. They started a navy and went on a big fleet build-up campaign. This is the flagship, obviously. It's affectionately known as Big Orange. Here's a monster sweeper, manned by Captain Newby and a really shaped-up crew. Just out of mothballs is the Fussy Hen, recommissioned and back in service. They tried scuba gear, and then they even brought in a submarine under the command of Commander Taylor here.
And so the other day, when I was going down, all of a sudden I came on just a big cloud of mud. Couldn't see a thing. Couldn't even see my own lights. And I looked at the compass, and I was 180 degrees off course. And I don't know why. Really wish I had a good idea what it was. Maybe that's why I'm here, so I can find out.
And that's what he thinks. But look what else they've got. Dr. Roy Mackle, a scientist with PhD and a lot of other letters after his name.
We think of the submarine being used mainly as an aid to the sonar investigation. If sonar teams observe an unusual object on their screen, they can't really go out and find out what it is. They can find out something about how fast it moves or how big it is. But the submarine can be sent out to check, find out if the object is just a reflection of a rock face or is really something interesting like a large animal.
And you know what that is? A gun.
A gun? Looks like something out of Robin Hood.
Very funny. But it's me they're trying to shoot. They want a small piece of my hide so they can tell what I am.
If something was contacted that was alive, we have a device that might take a small piece of material, and we could analyze it and decide whether tissue is involved and whether this is an animal. If we were fortunate, if it was a unique enough specimen, it might tell us a lot more. We wouldn't know that until we had a chance to examine the material with immunological and electron microscopy and so on.
Gosh, it sounds kind of serious, whatever he said.
I've got a question. How in the world did you ever hide from a submarine?
Well, fortunately, the water flowing in from the peat bogs is sort of beer-colored, pale lager, that is, 50 feet down and you can't see a thing.
Oh, come now, you're putting me on, old boy.
Oh, yeah? Listen to what Captain Newby has to say.
We did 2 aqualung dives here, one at Foyers on the opposite side of the loch, and one at Invermoriston further down this side. In each case, we found that at about 80 feet, the water was so dark you could literally see nothing at all.
So they called in the Air Force and tried to spot me from above. Looks like Wing Commander Wallace is getting ready for the dawn patrol. Thumbs up. Before he's through, it'll be thumbs down. Sometimes it seems like a monster hunter population explosion. Look, the place is swarming with monster hunters. And there is one problem. They're getting more scientific all the time. Look at that stuff.
I say, Nessie, that looks like rather sophisticated sonar equipment.
Sonar! They've got a fix on me. This could be the beginning of the end. This is serious. They're getting some readings I don't like. Look at all those crazy blips. This doesn't look like much, but to an expert it could be me. Oh, it is me. That's all. Forget it. Goodbye.
Nessie? Nessie? It's all right, Nessie. They've gone. You can get on with your story.
Well, that's all there is. You've had it. That's the whole story.
What story? A few fuzzy pictures, a handful of witnesses, and the sonar chart? What does that prove?
Well, it proves just enough and not too much. Listen, my friend, I've got to keep the mystery going. After all, my whole future's at stake. But it's not just me. It's those kids, those little school kids. And I'm not about to let them down. You see, I'm the guy that turned on their imaginations. 'Cause there's nothing more intriguing than a mystery.
Someday, investigation may explain away the mystery, and the loch will have lost its monster. But even if this happens, more will have been gained than lost. Whether Nessie turns out to be a totally imaginary creature or something based on reality, we will have another example that evidence, however strange, combined with imagination and with investigation, can help us learn a little bit more about the world we live in. There is yet much to learn, and many mysteries to solve. Unexplained footprints in the snows of the Himalayas still call up images of Yeti, the abominable snowman. Fuzzy photographs from the woods of the Pacific Northwest offer convincing evidence to some of the Sasquatch, or Bigfoot. Sightings of unidentified objects in the sky have attracted a host of those who believe not only that they exist, but that they are guided by creatures from other planets. These mysteries, too, may someday be solved. But to those with imagination and an open mind, and the courage to investigate new or unusual evidence, there will always be a special challenge in exploring the unknown.